Hey folks, my name's JR. Welcome to DIY Prepper Reloaded. About this time last year, I did a review of the CZ75 P-01, and that's been my carry gun for well over a decade. I liked it so much that I ended up buying this CZ75 SP-01 Tactical a few years after that. That was around like 2016, so I've had this gun for around 9 years. Now, for those of you that don't know about the CZ75 family of firearms, they're known for being exceptionally high quality. While guns like Glock and Smith & Wesson M&Ps tend to dominate the concealed carry market in the United States, CZs are very common in competition circles. They're used in sports like IPSC. So today, we're going to go over the SP-01 Tactical. We're going to cover its specs, features, and why you may want to consider this if you're looking for a high quality duty or home defense type sidearm. So getting into specs, the SP-01 Tactical is chambered in 9mm Luger, and it has a 19 plus 1 round capacity as it ships now. When I got mine though, it came with two 18-round magazines, and I'll talk more about those here in a minute. As you can see, this is unloaded and there isn't any ammo in the mags either. The SP-01 is an all-steel full-size gun, so it's got some heft to it. My P-01 that I did a review on last year has an alloy frame and is smaller, so this one does handle a lot differently. Empty, it weighs a little over 40 ounces, which puts it in the same realm as a 1911, if not a little bit heavier. Because of that, this is not a concealed carry gun. Now, of course, if you have the right holster and the right clothes, you could EDC a big fat walrus if you wanted to, but this wasn't designed with that application in mind. I think I've only tried to conceal carry this thing one time. My wife and I went to see a movie and I had this in an in-the-waistband holster at the 5 o'clock position. It was probably the most uncomfortable 2.5 hours of my life, and I haven't tried it since. The P-01 is just a lot better for that. This really is more of a duty style weapon. Like other CZ75s, the SP-01 Tactical is double action, single action. That means the gun can be fired either with the hammer down or with it cocked all the way back. What makes the SP-01 Tactical different from the regular SP-01 is that it comes with an ambidextrous decocker instead of a manual safety. Because of that, your first trigger pull will be long and heavy, and then follow-up shots will use the lighter single action pull. So how that works is you load the gun and then use the decocker to drop the hammer. That'll let you carry the gun safely. Then you draw the gun and shoot. As you do that, you pull the trigger, the hammer is going to travel all the way back and then fall when the trigger breaks. When the gun fires, the slide will cycle back, eject the casing, travel forward, loading the next round, and the hammer is going to stay all the way back. You let up on the trigger, it resets, and then you'll have single action shots until you decide to decock it again. Now, if you get the regular version with the manual safety, you will be able to carry it cocked and locked, meaning that the hammer's all the way back with the safety on, which I don't have here. That'll let you enjoy that light, crisp, single action trigger pull on your first shot. But on the flip side, if you want to drop the hammer, you will have to do that manually, which a lot of folks won't really want to do since it involves pulling the trigger on a loaded gun, and all that's a matter of personal preference and training philosophy. But in my opinion, the decocker is better for a defensive handgun. First, if you need to use the gun quickly, all you need to do is point and shoot. You don't have to worry about your brain crap in the bed because you're all stressed out and you end up fumbling the safety. Then you also don't have to worry about your thumb slipping off the hammer while you're trying to drop it manually, in addition to causing probably an involuntary bowel evacuation. Doing that could really mess up your floor or make you look like a total idiot at the gun range, and you know people will talk about it later. Then with the decocker, you can always just pull the hammer back manually for your first shot if you want to. Now, I wouldn't waste time doing that if a threat was right up on me, but if the idiot was further back and I had more time to act, I probably would. It's just a matter of training and judgment as to whether or not you would have time to do that in the specific situation that you find yourself in. And with the first trigger pull being so heavy, carrying decocked without a manual safety isn't dangerous at all. According to CZ specs, that double action pull is around 10.3 pounds. So for the gun to go off, it either has to be a deliberate action on your part or a remarkably catastrophic incident of stupidity and carelessness. The bottom line is that if you have a good holster and a fully functioning brain, you shouldn't have to worry about this going off on accident. Then, like other CZ75s, the SP-01 and SP-01 Tactical both come with firing pin block safeties, which prevent the firing pin from hitting the primer unless the trigger is pulled. So, as long as you do your job, this is an incredibly safe gun to carry. My P-01, which I've been carrying for almost 14 years, works in the exact same way, and I've never had any safety issues with it. Another thing that you'll notice about this SP-01 and other CZs is that it has internal slide rails. Whereas most handguns have a slide that rides on the outside of the frame, this one's slide rests inside of it, and that does a couple of things. First, it lowers the gun's bore axis, which helps reduce felt recoil. And low recoil is one thing that CZs are very well known for, and when you combine that with this one being all steel and having a big honking accessory rail on the front, all of that works together to give you a gun that has very little muzzle flip. Then having internal slide rails also provides more contact between the slide and the frame, which improves lockup, which in turn can also help improve the gun's intrinsic accuracy. And then there are things I like about this gun that go beyond just specs on paper. First, there's ergonomics. Like all CZ75 variants, the SP-01 feels like it belongs in your hand. The grip profile is perfect for folks with medium to large size hands. I could probably take a block of clay, squeeze the mess out of it, and let it dry, and the shape that it makes probably wouldn't fit my hand much better than this does. It just does such a good job. Now, one thing compared to the P-01 is that the balance on this isn't quite as good. The P-01 just settles right into your hand, whereas this SP-01 is a little front heavy, but that does help reduce muzzle flip a little. Then the SP-01 comes with checkered rubber grips. They're soft and comfortable, but since they're so tacky, your clothes may snag on them. So that's something to keep in mind when you're carrying this. This gun's also very reliable. Like, I haven't experienced any failures or malfunctions with this gun that could not be linked back to a magazine issue. The only problem with that, though, is that the magazines that had problems were the factory magazines that came with it. They work fine with standard factory full metal jacket rounds, but they struggled a lot feeding some of my reloads. And I know that some of y'all are probably thinking, oh, this idiot is blaming the gun for his crappy reloads. And to be fair, I would probably be thinking the same thing if I heard some rando on YouTube saying the same thing. But the thing is, I'm super OCD about that. I keep my overall links at spec, and I stick each round into a case gauge to make sure that it'll chamber, and I haven't had any issues with those same reloads in any of the other magazines that I use with this gun, or with my P-01 and any magazines that I use with it. So I don't think it's me. So because of those issues, I mainly use these factory mags for practicing reloads and for dry fire practice with snap caps. When I'm carrying this gun or using it at the range, I'll either use Metgar's 16 or 19 round mags. I tend to use the 16 rounders more since I like how they fit flush with the bottom of the gun, and they also fit into my magazine pouch, but the 19 rounders are just as reliable, so I still really like them. And both of those magazines will work in my P-01 as well. They just stick out of the bottom quite a bit. Then one thing that's important to me is that this SP-01 uses many of the same parts as my carry gun. That means that I can use one stockpile of parts to service both of them, and I think that's important if you're concerned about a longer-term survival situation, or even if you're just worried that our politicians, some of which who think that a barrel shroud is the shoulder thing that goes up, may try to ban guns or parts later on. Things like the trigger return spring and the extractor are comparable with both models, although some things like the slide stop and recoil spring are not. But even with those, I feel like I would be a lot better off than someone who has multiple systems to support. Now, that isn't to say that I don't have other guns too. You may have seen them on the channel, but these are my priority, and I have most of what I would need to keep them running pretty much for decades. Now, even though there are a lot of similarities between the P-01 and the SP-01 Tactical, there are some pretty big differences. First, the SP-01 is obviously larger. It has a 4.6-inch barrel versus the 3.75-inch for the P-01. Having a longer barrel can give you slightly higher velocities and a longer sight radius. All that basically means is that your rounds they might hit a little harder and it may be a little easier to shoot accurately. Then aside from making the gun heavier, the steel frame on the SP-01 could also be considered as more durable than the alloy frame on the P-01. It also has an ambidextrous decocker, which you don't find on some other CZs, and it comes with tritium night sights. And those are a big upgrade over the sights on the P-01. Those are basically just really small sights that use photoluminescent paint. They're kind of ghetto. But the sights were a big reason why I started using this one as my bedside gun. Then the SP-01 also has an extended beaver tail, and it's a little easier to take down. The slide stop sticks out a little further from the frame, which makes it easier to push out. Like, you shouldn't have any issues breaking this down in the field or at the range if you needed to. Now, even though I like my SP-01 Tactical, it isn't perfect for every situation. First, like I mentioned earlier, it's way too big for concealed carry, at least in the way that I prefer to do it. A lot of people also have a problem with how narrow the slide is, and that's a byproduct of the slide riding inside of the frame. And while it does help lock up and makes recoil more manageable, it gives you a lot less to grab onto. If you got good grip strength and then you're used to it, it's really not that bad, but it can be a challenge for some people. Take my wife, for example. She's pretty tiny, and she just can't lock the slide back on this. In her defense, I have seen guys struggle with it too, but I will say that if you train with this gun, manipulating the slide on something like a Glock is almost nothing after you get used to this thing. After that, another issue with the SP-01 is that it is not a good choice for people with smaller hands. The contoured grip that makes it perfect for folks with medium and large hands can be a problem for smaller folks. Then when you combine that with how far forward the trigger rests, especially for that first double action shot, it becomes unshootable for some people. I'm not trying to pick on my wife, but once again, she cannot reach the trigger while maintaining a proper grip on this gun. In order for her to reach the trigger, she has to bring her hand way down here on the grip, which is not ideal. When I try to fix it, it hurts her, she gets mad, and it's just not worth all that. Something like a Glock 19 or Smith & Wesson Shield Easy would be a much better choice for people like her. You can get reach reduction kits that'll help with all that, but I prefer to keep my defensive guns in stock configuration as much as possible. Then one issue that's common to all double action, single action guns is that you have two very distinct trigger pulls that you have to master. The single action pull is super easy. It's light and crisp, so most people shouldn't have any issues with it. The double action pull is where a lot of people will struggle, especially when they're trying to shoot at longer distances. For that reason, if you're a casual shooter who doesn't practice much, something striker fired will probably be a better choice. Even though the triggers on those aren't usually as nice as the single action pull on this one, they're really not that bad, and once you figure it out, then you're going to be good to go since you just have that one trigger pull that you have to worry about. Of course, you can always pull the hammer back for longer shots on this, like we discussed earlier, but that in and of itself is something else that you would need to train doing. Double action, single actions are just inherently more complicated from a use standpoint, and they're also more complicated from a design standpoint as well. This is going to have significantly more small moving parts than something like Glock will, and that naturally gives it more potential points of failure. Even though these guns are reliable, they do have a couple of known weaknesses. For example, the trigger return springs had issues for a while, and I had an extractor break on my P-01 several years back. When these guns run, they run great, but they're not invincible. Of course, that's not to say that other guns can't have issues too, like Glocks and other striker-fired guns. They might have issues with locking blocks, but if something goes wrong with something more mechanically complex, making repairs on it can be more difficult. If you're someone who knows their way around guns and has tools and spare parts, then, you're going to be fine. But more simple guns would still be easier to fix in most cases. So overall, I think the CZ75 SP-01 Tactical is an excellent option if you're looking for a duty type sidearm, especially if you're an experienced shooter. It may not be the best choice for a beginner, but if you've been shooting for a while and you're a gun person, then I think that you'll appreciate a lot about this gun. Now, if you want to see the full review that I did over the P-01 a while back, then click here. Or if you want to see the guns and gear that'll disappear when something stupid happens, then click here. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.